In fairyland there had been a real law, a law that could be broken, for the definition of a law is something that can be broken. But the machinery of this cosmic prison was something that could not be broken, for we ourselves were only a part of its machinery. We were either unable to do things or we were destined to do them. The idea of the mystical condition quite disappeared. One can neither have the firmness of keeping laws nor the fun of breaking them. The largeness of this universe had nothing of that freshness and airy outlook which we have praised in the universe of the poet. This modern universe is literally an empire. That is, it was vast, but it was not free. One went into larger and larger windowless rooms, rooms big with Babylonian perspective, but one never found the smallest window or a whisper of outer air. Their infernal parallels seemed to expand with distance. But for me all good things come to a point. Swords, for instance. So, finding the boast of the big cosmos so unsatisfactory to my emotions, I began to argue about it a little, and I soon found that the whole attitude was even shallower than could have been expected. According to these people, the cosmos was one thing since it had one unbroken rule. Only, they would say, while it is one thing, it is also the only thing there is. Why then should one worry particularly to call it large? There is nothing to compare with it. It would be just as sensible to call it small. A man may say, I like this vast cosmos, with its throng of stars and its crowd of varied creatures. But if it comes to that, why should not a man say, I like this cosy little cosmos, with its decent number of stars and as neat a provision of livestock as I wish to see? One is as good as the other. They are both mere sentiments. It is mere sentiment to rejoice that the sun is larger than the earth. It is quite as sane a sentiment to rejoice that the sun is no larger than it is. A man chooses to have an emotion about the largeness of the world. Why should he not choose to have an emotion about its smallness? It happened that I had that emotion. When one is fond of anything, one addresses it by diminutives, even if it is an elephant or a life guardsman. The reason is that anything, however huge, that can be conceived of as complete, can be conceived of as small. If military moustaches did not suggest a sword or tusks a tail, then the object would be vast because it would be immeasurable. But the moment you can imagine a guardsman, you can imagine a small guardsman. The moment you really see an elephant, you can call it tiny. If you can make a statue of a thing, you can make a statuette of it. These people profess that the universe was one coherent thing, but they were not fond of the universe. But I was frightfully fond of the universe and wanted to address it by a diminutive. I often did so, and it never seemed to mind. Actually, and in truth, I did feel that these dim dogmas of vitality were better expressed by calling the world small than by calling it large. For about infinity there was a sort of carelessness which was the reverse of the fierce and pious care which I felt touching the pricelessness and the peril of life. They showed only a dreary waste. But I felt a sort of sacred thrift, for economy is far more romantic than extravagance. To them stars were an unending income of halfpence. But I felt about the golden sun and the silver moon as a schoolboy feels if he has 1 sovereign and 1 shilling. These subconscious convictions are best hit off by the colour and tone of certain tales. Thus I have said that stories of magic alone can express my sense that life is not only a pleasure, but a kind of eccentric privilege. I may express this other feeling of cosmic coziness by allusion to another book, always read in boyhood, Robinson Crusoe, which I read about this time, and which owes its eternal vivacity to the fact that it celebrates the poetry of limits, nay, even the wild romance of prudence. Crusoe is a man on a small rock, with a few comforts just snatched from the sea. The best thing in the book is simply the list of things saved from the wreck. The greatest of poems is an inventory. Every kitchen tool becomes ideal, because Crusoe might have dropped it in the sea. It is a good exercise in empty or ugly hours of the day to look at anything, the coal scuttle or the bookcase, and think how happy one could be to have brought it out of the sinking ship on the solitary island. But it is a better exercise still to remember how all things have had this hair-breadth escape. Everything has been saved from a wreck. Every man has had one horrible adventure. As a hidden, untimely birth, he had not been, as infants that never see the light. Men spoke much in my boyhood of restricted or ruined men of genius, and it was common to say that many a man was a great might have been. To me it is a more solid and startling fact that any man in the street is a great might not have been. But I really felt, the fancy may seem foolish, as if all the order and number of things were the romantic remnant of Crusoe's ship. That there are two sexes and one sun was like the fact that there were two guns and one axe. It was poignantly urgent that none should be lost, but somehow it was rather fun that none could be added. The trees and the planets seemed like things saved from the wreck, and when I saw the Matterhorn I was glad that it had not been overlooked in the confusion. I felt economical about the stars as if they were sapphires. They are called so in Milton's Eden. I hoarded the hills. For the universe is a single jewel, and while it is a natural cant to talk of a jewel as peerless and priceless, of this jewel it is literally true. This cosmos is indeed without peer and without price, for there cannot be another one. Thus ends in unavoidable inadequacy the attempt to utter the unutterable things. These are my ultimate attitudes toward life, the soils for the seeds of doctrine. These in some dark way I thought before I could write, and felt before I could think. That we may proceed more easily afterwards, I will roughly recapitulate them now. I felt in my bones, first, that world does not explain itself. It may be miracle with a supernatural explanation. It may be a conjuring trick with a natural explanation. But the explanation of the conjuring trick, if it is to satisfy me, will have to be better than the natural explanations I have heard. The thing is magic, true or false. Second, I came to feel as if magic must have a meaning, and that meaning must have someone to mean it. There was something personal in the world, as in a work of art. Whatever it meant violently. Third, I thought this purpose beautiful in its old design, in spite of its defects, such as dragons. Fourth, that the proper form of thanks to it is some form of humility and restraint. We should thank God for beer and Burgundy by not drinking too much of them. We owed also an obedience to whatever made us. And last and strangest, there had come into my mind a vague and vast impression that in some way all good was a remnant to be stored and held sacred out of some primordial ruin. Man had saved his good as Crusoe had saved his goods. He had saved them from a wreck. All this I felt, and the age gave me no encouragement to feel it. And all this time I had not even thought of Christian theology. End of chapter 4, part 2.